Rev up your engines!
Rob S. says, hey Scotty, I got a 2016 Honda Pilot Elite with a 9-speed and I'm planning on keeping it for 10 years. What should I do to ensure it stays reliable? Don't listen to any BS that anybody tells you. Still change the engine oil and filter like every 5,000 miles. That's the main thing that makes those things last. Change the oil. Do all the maintenance that you should. You're going to keep it for 10 years. Use that long life coolant and change it once every 5 years. That's no big deal. Change the brake fluid once every 4 or 5 years. That's no big deal. But you just, if you can keep it for 10 years, you want to keep that stuff up. And you want, of course, stay away from really deep water. You don't want to ever get water intruded into the electronics, because all modern vehicles, they've got so many computer modules in them. Some of them have 56 computer modules, some of them 156. So you don't want to get the electronics wet, because that will ruin it over time. And then they're so complicated these days, nobody knows how to fix them. Herb Bowens, and he says, my car tries to start on its own. Got one of those remote starters. My advice would be disconnect the system, because they can go haywire and do that. But if it's a normal car, what happens is the ignition switches can short the power and they won't turn themselves off, and then it'll keep running the starter. And the other thing is, if your starter is really shorting out, it'll do that too. I remember when I was a kid, I had an Opel, and I knew the starter was going out, and I parked at the end of the driveway, and my mother parked the Chevy Impala we had behind it, and all of a sudden, I'd always leave the car in reverse, and all of a sudden the car started to crank the engine in reverse, and it was backing into my mother's new car, and I thought, oh, she's going to kill me if it hits it. So I ran between them, and I stuck my leg in there. Man, it crushed my leg. I'm screaming at my mother, hey, come on here, and she jumped in the Opel and took it out of gear, and then I had to replace the starter. So sometimes if the starter starts going, it'll do that too. Real Madrid says, Scotty, got a used Honda Accord with 150,000 miles. Should I change the timing belt? Well, of course, it depends on what year it is. You know, the newer ones have timing chains, and you have to think about it. But if it's a timing belt, yes, you definitely want to change it. They tell you to change it every 100,000. If it's got 150, I would change it now. Then you don't have to think about it. It's not that big of a deal if it's a 4-cylinder. If it's a V6, it's going to cost you a reasonable amount of money, because that's a pretty involved job. But the 4-cylinder ones, it's not that bad of a job changing the timing belt on a 4-cylinder Honda. But if it's a V6, one, it's a bigger job, and two, you want to use a really good mechanics, because it's much harder to do than the 4-cylinder one on a Honda. Random Computer Geeky says, my friend has a 2000 Camry with a 2.2. He wants to put a transmission from a 3.0 V6 in the same year. Will the transmission fit or not? No, it won't fit. They're different engines. They have different specs. The computer would have to be reprogrammed. Now, that's a very good question that fits a lot of stuff, though. Because when I was young, you could swap all kinds of things off. There were a lot of universal stuff in cars, but not today. Everything's made for certain computer software, made for certain size engines, certain mounts, certain gear ratios. And it's best not to modify anything, especially a Toyota. They're pretty well designed in the first place. Don't mess up with something that was close to perfect to begin with. Peter Rodriguez, and Peter says, hey Scotty, I'm looking to buy an 87 Chevy 350, but should I get a car or a truck? Which is best owned? Well, back in 87, Chevy made pretty good pickup trucks. You know, 350 V8 Chevy pickup trucks, you can't go wrong with them. It's old as the hills in 87. So, you know, you're talking about what? 32-year-old vehicle. That's pretty old. But if you live in Texas, they're not rusted, you know. Look at it, as long as the frame isn't rusted, you can always fix it up. Parts are always available for those old things, and they can run a really long time. I would get a Chevy pickup truck with a 350 if you want to get an old one like that. Joseph Valvo says, Scotty, your thoughts on a Chevy Corvair? I'm looking at one. Those were bizarre cars. That was Ralph Nader wrote that book, Unsafe at Any Speed, because all the stuff he found wrong with them. But they're collector's items now. They were air-cooled 6-cylinder engines, and especially with a standard transmission, they were relatively fast cars. Now, there's a guy in Pennsylvania, and he's got a big store, and he bought a lot of the parts, and he even makes new parts for the things. You can get parts for him. If you like a Corvair and you want to fix it up, the only real caveat I have is check it out good, jack it up to see if the frame is rotten. Because if the frame is rotten, rotten, don't buy it. You don't want to buy a car with a rotten frame. Then you got to do the whole body off the frame, and it's too much hassle. But as long as the frame isn't rotten, like you get one from California or Texas or Arizona, someplace that doesn't have snow and salt and stuff, they can be very fun cars to drive around in, and they're still not all that expensive to buy. They are collector items in quotes, but they're never going to be cars that go for $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, so they're kind of fun to fiddle around with.
So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.